And good afternoon, everyone. This is yours truly, attorney Michael X, aka Michael Cord, aka the angriest black man in America. We have one of my arguably the most important show that I've had here at TV Courtroom on Philly Cam. And you might say, well, you've had some great shows. Why do you say this is the greatest one? Well, here's why I say this is the greatest one. Everything that African Americans do and have done in this country is a result of what happened with slavery. That from slavery, August 25, 1619, until today, Friday, December 2nd, 2022, all that has a beginning. And that beginning is Africa before we were brought here to America. So the reason why I say that this show today is arguably the most important, correction, definitely the most important, is because we're going to deal with something called Africatown. We know that in many major cities, there are certain ethnic enclaves in those major cities: New York, DC, Chicago, Detroit, and Philadelphia. And here in Philadelphia, we have something called Chinatown. And every time I drive through Chinatown, I'm happy for my Asian brothers and sisters. I'm not Asian, but it's wonderful to see a self-sustained economy where people don't beg others for success. Those people, in this case, Asian people, depend on themselves for success. So as I was driving through Chinatown once, I saw a bank, I saw a travel agency, I saw a real estate business, I saw a laundromat, I saw a hotel, I saw a self-sustaining economy. And I said to myself, why can't we have something called Africatown? Now it's really interesting because they call that Asian town Chinatown, and even that, believe it or not, is quite interesting and impressive. And here's why: because Asia is a continent. China is just one country in that great continent. And those Asian people came together and basically said this: I don't care what you call it, just make sure that our people control it. In other words, a rose by any other name would smell just as sweet. And their unity allowed them to say, we'll call it Chinatown, even though we have Koreans, even we have people from Vietnam, even though we have people from Japan, even though we have people from many of the other countries in Asia. We don't care what we call it. It's Asians coming together. And that to me was quite impressive. Now, here we have in America, here we have in a land where 13% of the population is Black. Now here in Pennsylvania, now here in Philadelphia, we're going to have something called Africatown. And in this Africatown, it can be like the new Black Wall Street. And we know about what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma, when Black folks came together and created a self-sustaining economy. Well, the end of that story was not great, because that wonderful economic enclave was destroyed by thuggish, violent, murderous, rapist. Well, I was about to say racist, then I slipped and said rapist, but no, I didn't slip, because there was all type of horrific goings on, not only in terms of physical assault, not only in terms of robbery, not only in terms of theft, but rape and sexual assault. But primarily, it was the murder and the robbery and the theft that destroyed that self-sustaining Black economic enclave. That was a great beginning, although it was a tragic end with Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I don't like to say that Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma was murdered, as much as I want to say that Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma was crucified. And the reason why I prefer crucifixion is because with a crucifixion, at least the one that almost everybody knows about, there was a resurrection. So each time Black people from any of the 50 states in the United States, plus the District of Columbia, plus any of the 55 countries on the continent of Africa, anytime those Black folks from the diaspora, from all over the planet, anytime they come together in one particular place, it should be a safe space. It should be a prosperous space. And just about a week ago, it was announced that such a space has begun here in Philadelphia. So when I said to you at the outset that this is the greatest segment that I've ever done here at TV Courtroom, the greatest segment I've ever participated in here at Philly Camp. And tomorrow on Saturday, every Saturday from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., I do the radio courtroom show on WURD 96.1 FM. So every Saturday, 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock p.m., the radio courtroom at WURDradio.com. I've been doing that for about a decade, and I've had some great guests and some great shows. I'm going to have this Africatown segment on my radio courtroom tomorrow, and that's going to be the greatest show that I've had on the radio. So you all are getting a wonderful presentation today by TV. And those who will follow me at WURDradio.com tomorrow at 1 p.m., you'll get the greatest radio show I've ever done. I can't tell you how proud I am of this. All of the major players involved in this Africatown creation, I know them, and I've worked with several of them. And I'm honored that they have agreed to be a part of today's show. They will include Vafi Jabate. He's the CEO of ACANA, A-C-A-N-A. That's the African Cultural Alliance of North America. Powerful organization, powerful man. Also joining us will be Stanley Straughter. He has many titles, but he's the chairman emeritus of the Mayor's Commission on African and Caribbean Immigrant Affairs. Extremely knowledgeable man. Last but certainly not least, former city council person Janie Blackwell, the founder and chairperson of the Mayor's Commission on African and Caribbean Immigrant Affairs. The idea that Black people have been beaten down in this country for 400 years. And I'm not talking about just from August 25, 1619 till the passage of the 13th Amendment. By the way, the anniversary of the passage of the 13th Amendment is just a few days from now, December 6th, because it passed on December 6th, 1865. But my point is this: we're not just talking about how oppressed Black people were in America for 246 years from August 25, 1619 until December 6, 1865. We're talking about after 1865 came the Black codes, came sharecropping, came mass incarceration, came convict leasing, came Jim Crow, came police brutality, housing discrimination, redlining, gerrymandering, everything you can think of. So we're talking about at least 400 years. And if we do the math, 1619, we're talking about 403 years of enslavement, brutality, discrimination, bigotry, prejudice, all types of racial oppression. And every now and then, like with Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and a number of other places, not just Tulsa, Oklahoma, a number of other places, we've been like the phoenix rising from the ashes, where we're beat down, but we rise again. And thanks to Vafi Jabate, thanks to Stanley Straughter, and thanks to Madam City Council Person Janie Blackwell, we're rising from the ashes again. You know, far too often when we talk about Black history, when we talk about African American history, when we talk about African history, we talk about our defeats and how we have struggled. And it's important, for example, for Black people to talk about slavery because it explains our condition today. It explains our plight today. It explains why a Black person is inclined to earn much less and has much less wealth compared to the average white person. Now, don't get me wrong, there are wealthy Black people, there are poor white people, but on average, white folks earn more and have more. Is it because they're genetically predisposed to be economically better than Black people? Of course not. It's solely because of slavery and its residue. I always tell people my story. Here I am, born and raised in North Philly to poor parents. I was lucky enough to get into a great school, Masterman, go on to college at Cheney University, and then go to law school. And now I'm a lawyer and doing pretty good. But then I say, but I'm the first person to go to college in my entire family. And obviously the first to graduate, and certainly the first and only to go to law school. But it's so funny, when I was at Masterman, which was about 99% white when I was there, most of these students there, they had parents who were lawyers or doctors or CPAs or engineers or college professors. While my mother was a maid at a hotel, does that mean their parents were better and smarter than mine? No. It's because my parents and my grandparents, my grandfather, for example, Walter Davis, he was born in Alabama in 1913. What do you think a Black man being born in Alabama in 1913, what do you think, what options does he have in life? He went on to become a farmhand and died in that job. He did what he could to help the family, did what he could to help me. But the only reason he was stuck in that dead end farmhand job is because he didn't have the opportunities that white folks have. I talked about Black Wall Street. Can you imagine if Black Wall Street, we're talking about near the turn of the century, 1910, 1920s. What if Black folks had been able to keep those types of economic enclaves? I'm talking about 1920s. That's my grandfather's time. Pass it on to his children. Pass it on to his grandchildren. Now, Michael Cord, I'm the CEO at a Black Wall Street bank in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So now I'm sending my children to law school. I'm sending them to medical school or whatever. But we didn't have those opportunities. But I must say right now, thanks to Africatown, we have that opportunity. So in just about 2 or 3 minutes, we're going to have our 3 guests on. But before we get there, I'm also going to, as I pointed out, do a show, a radio show on my radio Courtroom show. So I encourage people to tune in tomorrow, Saturday, in fact, every Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m., WURD 96.1 FM, and we're online at WURDradio.com. And big shout out to our producer extraordinaire, Roland, for putting that up there. In addition, I'm going to be writing a column about Africatown in my weekly publication in the Philadelphia Tribune. So it won't be this Sunday, but it will probably be next Sunday. Check out the Philadelphia Tribune, a great article about Africatown, what it is and what it will be. So make sure you tune into the radio show and make sure you check out the Philadelphia Tribune in the next week or so. Let me back up. In about 60 seconds or so, we're going to have all our guests lined up. But let me just start from the beginning, because I talked a few minutes ago. About slavery and how Black people often talk about their past beginning with slavery, which is not a good thing to do. It's a great thing to do if you want to explain our plight. Like I said, August 25, 1619, December 6, 1865. My grandfather was born about 40 years after that. Well, he's born 40, 50 years after that. His son, born 30 years after that. His grandson, born in the 1960s, about 60, 70, 80 years after that. You can make a direct line, a direct connection between slavery and our condition today. And it's important to explain our plight, to say that, hey, we're economically deprived and educationally deprived and politically deprived and all of that in terms of deprivation because of slavery. But I want people to understand our history didn't begin with slavery. Our history is the history of the human race. Our history is the history of civilization. And I want to make sure that people understand that. I'm going to talk more about that as soon as we get our three guests up. I believe we do have at least two of them. So we're going to get started with them. And our third one is either with us or will join us. So we're going to be bringing it up. And as soon as I see their faces, as soon as you see their faces, we're going to jump right into it. But before we do that, let me give folks a heads up. I did talk about my Philadelphia Tribune column. By the way, the Philadelphia Tribune is the oldest Black continuously published newspaper in America. And I'm honored to write for the Philadelphia Tribune. Well, what I often write about in the Tribune, well, not often, but I do slide it in here and there, but at least in February, and obviously because that's Black History Month, I always talk about the beginning. And the beginning is 200,000 years ago, in the Nile Valley region of East Africa, where the first human being, the first Homo sapien, came into existence. And there's much more I want to share with you about that, but I want to kind of tie that in when we get our guests lined up. And they are getting lined up. But I just encourage folks to check out my column in the Philadelphia Tribune on a weekly basis. Check out the radio Courtroom show at WRD 96.1 FM. But going back, I mentioned August 25, 1619. August 25, 1619 was the beginning of the end for Black people in America. But thanks to concepts and initiatives and projects like Africatown, we can look at that negative and turn it into a positive. And I'm going to spend the bulk of the show, we were going to just give about maybe 20 minutes or so to the Africatown topic, but the ancestors they're whispering in my ear and they're telling me that, hey, you got to expand this discussion. So what we're going to do is we're going to get with our guests to understand that two of our guests are together, and that's fine. So we can do all that. That'd be absolutely perfect. So folks, I talked long enough. I'm going to turn it over to our guests, and let me just spend 60 seconds letting folks know what we're about to do. As I pointed out in the last 10 minutes, I've done for the last, 4 or 5 years, this TV courtroom show. On WURD, I've done that on the radio for about 12 years. And I've had some great guests. I've had some great topics. But today for me is the greatest in terms of the topics and the guests, because I'm beaming with pride right now because of something called Africatown. And I could talk to you for the next 5 hours, but let me wrap it up in 30 seconds so we can get to our guests. When we talk about Black history in America, we tend to start 400 years ago, August 25, 1619, with the birth of American slavery in colonial British America. And we look at that and realize how beaten down we were. And that's okay to talk about slavery because it explains our plight today. But the history of Black folks in this world, on this planet, didn't begin with slavery. The history of Black folks is the history of humanity. The history of Black folks is the history of civilization. The first human being, the first Homo sapien, was African 200,000 years ago in the Nile Valley region of East Africa. And out of that came algebra and geometry and calculus and monotheism and agriculture and medicine and all those great things that we give other people credit for. And more recently, even shortly after slavery, we had Black Wall Street until racist thugs destroyed it. But when we think about how beaten down Africans have been throughout the diaspora, we have to realize that we're like that phoenix that always rises from the ashes. And that's the perfect segue to Africatown. Because when you hear me talk about Africatown, you would think that I came up with it because I brag about it like it's like my baby. But as Vafi Jabate told me yesterday, it's our baby. It's our thing. We've all come together. So without further ado, as I pointed out, we have Stanley Straughter. He's going to give you his background. He's the chairman emeritus of the Mayor's Commission on African and Caribbean Immigrant Affairs. We have Vafi Jabate, the CEO of ACANA. And by the way, for folks who don't know what ACANA is, it's the African Cultural Alliance of North America. And although she needs no introduction, many of us call her Janie from Cheney. I call her Madam Former Councilperson Janie Blackwell, the founder and chairperson of the Mayor's Commission on African and Caribbean Immigrant Affairs. Let's do this. Let's start with Madam Councilperson Blackwell to just tell us what Africatown is. And once she finishes giving us her 2, 3, 4 minutes defining Africatown, I want to shift it right to Brother Vafi Jabate to the same question. What is Africatown? And then we hear from my good friend Stanley Straughter. So, Madam Councilwoman, what is Africatown? And we can't hear you. I don't know if you're muted or not. You might be muted.
Africatown is the most exciting program project. This is a program where in Southwest Philadelphia, where we have 120,000 Africans and Caribbeans, we are building, not people have heard of Chinatowns all over the country, but Africatown will be a location from close to the airport down to Southwest Philadelphia to about 56th Street, where we will have all kinds of projects from a museum, lest we forget museum, to housing, to education, to technology centers, to restaurants, some 500 to 700 restaurants, many of which already exist, a whole community that will boast of and show the businesses, the lives, education, the everything dealing with Africans, Caribbeans, and certainly all other people. Africatown will be formulated by Africans and Caribbeans, but it is for everybody. It is for African Americans. Certainly, we've all come from the same place. We've all come from Africa. But this has been a dream of mine for some 10 years. We've been talking about it. We finally put it together. And this will be a wonderful initiative that will even allow people who live in Africa to fly to Philadelphia, because the airlines are working on it, to come straight from Africa to Philadelphia to deplane, and you're right there. You're in Africatown. So it is a location, a lifestyle, a culture, and the opportunity to showcase Philadelphia and this country in a way that it has not yet seen. I'm very, very excited about it and looking forward to all that it can be and will be.
I knew that we were going to start it off with a bang by having you. Let's now turn it over to Brother Vafi. When I spoke with him yesterday, it was supposed to be a 15-minute conversation. It turned into almost an hour long. I mean, he gave me a history lesson. He brought in the connection between all Black people of the diaspora. So I'm going to turn it over to him. What to you, sir, is Africatown?
Africatown is a destination point for the African diaspora people. Or after many years of slavery, after many years of the alternative media trying to portray us as a divided people, God finally brought it to light that we need to have a place that we can call our own. Africatown is going to be that place. It's going to be that place where we have clinics, hospitals to treat our people, job training center, arts and culture museum, like Councilwoman Blackwell said, or affordable housing opportunity, business development and skill building opportunity for us, for children up in a good and secure environment. We will also hope that we will reduce uh, unemployment. So all of the above are what our desire is, to build a community called Africatown. Africatown, through working with the City Commission on planning, begins at 47 and Baltimore North of Baltimore, and then south to Lindbergh Boulevard all the way to 84th Street. So, in other words, when the councilwoman said that even the airport will be right there within the town. So, this is what our hope is, and this is what God has made it possible for us to work on it. And last week, Friday, we were able to break ground and begin the process of building the first structures in Africatown. Thank you.
And before we hear from my good friend Stan, I want to come back to you. When you and I spoke yesterday, you told me your indigenous homeland, where you have come from. If you could, before we hear from Stan, I'd like you to repeat some of that. Tell us where you're from and tell us why this is for the diasporic Black folks. I mean, when we talk about Black folks, I'm not talking about Black folks from the motherland only, or Black folks from America only. I'm talking about Black folks from the diaspora. Explain to the listening audience what you told me about how this embraces all Black folks in the diaspora.
Yeah, thank you. What we said yesterday was that there's always been an attempt to divide us based on our origin or whatever. I don't even want to call it origin. Where is our current locality? So there's always been an attempt to say Caribbean people. So you ask them, and they will tell you, "I'm not." Or the African American people, they will say, "Oh no, I'm an American. I'm not an African." And then the African people who come and say, "Oh no, I'm an African immigrant." This is one opportunity that brings us together, and now we begin to uh, uh, let people know us as the African diaspora people. So we all are included in that. After 400 years of slavery, we all have now begun to call ourselves one people with one cause and with one destiny.
Powerful, powerful. By the way, I'm so hyped about this topic. I was supposed to have two topics I'm dealing with today and end this at 4:10, but to hell with that. I'm not ending it at 4:10. We're going to keep this thing going until they turn the lights off at 4:30, because this is just that important. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to my good friend Stan. Stan, before you talk about Africatown, let folks know how many hats you wear, a little bit about your background. He's muted.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Oh, yes, you're good. You're good.
All right. Thank you very much, Michael, for having me here. And I certainly want to thank my colleagues, the Honorable Janie Blackwell and Mr. Vofi Jabate, for being here with us. I was blessed to have an opportunity to work with some great leaders in Philadelphia, like the late Reverend Leon Howard Sullivan, Hardy Williams, Lucian Blackwell, David P. Richardson Jr., and of course, Mrs. Blackwell, and many, many others during the time I came up and struggled. So part of that education that brought me here, I had a job during a time with Reverend Sullivan. I'd worked for OIC of America and OIC International. At OIC of America, I set up the first Black cooperative in the city of Philadelphia in 1970. And OIC International, I got a chance to travel to about 13 different African countries, including went to Western Europe, Denmark, Sweden, and Holland, studied the cooperative movement there, spent some time in Russia, Jamaica, Brazil. And of course, working with Reverend Solomon, I had a chance to work with him to work and organize the African American summits. He was a giant that I learned some things from, maybe not enough, but a few things. And I'm honored to have had the opportunity to be on the planet during this time. Of course, the contribution of the late Congressman William H. Gray III and Dave P. Richardson, Lucian Blackwell, and late Senator Hardy Williams is just as important in my career, because the beautiful thing about all of them is that they taught me, I learned, and they all supported every effort I ever had on IDEA in Africa. And I learned so much from all of them about Africa, including Mrs. Blackwell now. So that's sort of the capstone of what that is, but it has brought me to be able to work with this wonderful team we have here. And I want to thank Mrs. Blackwell, because over 20 years ago, she founded the Mayor's Commission on African Caribbean Immigrant Affairs, as you pointed out. And of course, Vofi Jabate, over 20 years ago, created the African Caribbean Cultural Alliance of North America. And both of them, in their own caring way, have created a pathway for us to come together and to bring this dynamic project that will enhance economic development in West and Southwest Philadelphia, an area that some people looked at it and called it a slum, and we looked at it and say, oh my God, it's a gold mine. It's a gold mine of Black talent, educational experience mixed, as well as so many wonderful Black and brown people that are working together to uplift that community. And as Mrs. Blackwell pointed out, it's so close to the airport. It's so close to all of the major rail lines, and very close to the port itself. And so we have an opportunity now to begin to build on that background. And what Mr. Jabate pointed out was that the first building of Africatown will be at 54th and Chester. It's called the African Akana Center. It will be an office building, a complex that will include daycare, health facilities, the immigration services. This health services will be opening to everybody in the community, as well as the daycare center. Soon going to have a low and moderate income housing project there at that corner. As we go through Southwest Philadelphia, and Vofi mentioned this, but let me say again, as you start at the airport coming west along Lindbergh Avenue to about 48th and 49th Street, up to Chester, then Baltimore, and around again, you're in the primary geographic area that we're referring to as Africatown. As Mrs. Blackwell pointed out, in Greater Philadelphia area, there's about 120,000 people of African descent that are immigrants in the Greater Philadelphia area, representing some 35 African Caribbean nations. And they, along with the African American community, are the predominant people that live in this particular area. Michael, let me just step back for 1 minute, because I want to say, as you pointed out and Vofi pointed out, the African Union has recognized people of African descent outside of Africa as the sixth region of the Africa diaspora. So we are formally and involved, whether you want to be an African or not. And I know still some people that don't want to be African, but the idea is the unity of our people of African descent from around the world coming together with a specific purpose, that is to recognize our roots and our efforts to uplift and free the global African diaspora, wherever you might be. We might be in Europe, Brazil, North Philly, Strawberry Mansion, all over Africa, but that's the essence of the African diaspora concept. On that point, I just want to move quickly to Africatown, because while we are all proud, and I'm glad to hear of you being excited about it, it will make a major economic impact to Southwest Philadelphia, as well as to the entire Greater Philadelphia region. And that's because tourism is a major industry in Philadelphia. It's about $10.3 billion a year prior to the COVID-19 epidemic, and it employs over 80,000 people a year. So for us to look at Africatown as a destination point for the global African diaspora, it's a connector to bring to advertise at least to the 1.3 billion people on the continent of Africa, Africans in the other parts of the Africa, Latin America, Caribbean, Euro-African, and even Canada and all of North America. It's something that has never been done before in the entire United States of America. If you go on the Philadelphia website called Visit Philadelphia, you will see Africa. You will not see Africatown. You will see Chinatown. You will see the Italian market. You will see many, many things, but you won't see anything directing African visitors to where their people are and how to come visit them. And we want to certainly have this as a tourist destination and brand it as such. And everybody that is in the neighborhood, that works in the neighborhood, will be able to have access to this dynamic people from around the world that are coming. And this is all people. But I just want to point out that we, meaning the city of Philadelphia, have not marketed Philadelphia as a tourist destination to Africa specifically. We've branded it to some organizations, to some people, but if you look at their marketing, they market nothing to Africa in and of itself. And this will change. This is seriously important because the economic impact, as Vofi and Mrs. Blackwell pointed out, will create not only jobs for people in our community and particularly our youth in the creative economy, as well and creative and partner economy, and that will be a part of the African Caribbean Performing Arts Center. We'll also have an African Caribbean Trade Center, an innovation technology hub. Can you imagine a community in Southwest Philadelphia? We're right in the heart of a community that we have University of Pennsylvania, and the Wharton School, we have the University of Sciences, but we don't have one innovation technology center in the Southwest Philadelphia community where Black people would need them. And so this is an opportunity not only to have the Innovation Technology Center, but to train our youth, all of them that can come for jobs of the future, as well as connect with this technology around the world and to bring them to be engaged in the part of the world that is developing. Many of these young people, my grandchildren, my baby children like yours, are already in the economy, but we don't have a place for them to come and be a part of the economy and look toward this fantastic jobs in the future. So the Innovation Technology Center will help to do that. I think in terms of arts and culture, you've already mentioned some of that, but think about it. Right now, you got Burna Boy from Nigeria. You have all these great African artists that are coming to Philadelphia to perform. On top of that, I mean, how many decades have African American artists going to Africa to perform? So we've already been in this global economy. It's now an opportunity for us with Africatown, the African Caribbean Performance Arts Center, to uplift that and make it a destination point for all of us. I think there's something that Mr. Vofi Jabate and Akana does every year at Penn's Landing. They have the Akana African Festival there, where you have international acts of African and Caribbean people from all around the world who come to Philadelphia. But we want it to happen on a more regular basis, and this will be an opportunity with the growth and development and expansion of our work in Africatown to get this done. So let me stop there if you have any questions, and thank Mrs. Blackwell again for her vision over 25 years ago, and Vofi for his hard work about Akana and setting it up so that all our people in Southwest Philadelphia can benefit from the work, the medical center, and the things that are all going on now. I don't know if Vofi didn't tell you that they have a major poverty alleviation program where they spend over $1 million a year working with people, low-income people, enhancing their wealth. Right now, it's not to come. He's been doing it for the last 3 years, along with the Philadelphia Chinatown Development Corporation and Southwest CDC. So there's some major things that are going on, and we want to continue them and help expand them. And thank Vofi and Mrs. Blackwell for their work, their vision, and continued commitment to this vision.
Those of you who just tuned in, you just heard the powerful words from Stanley Stroughter, the Chairman Emeritus of the Mayor's Commission on African and Caribbean Immigrant Affairs. Along with Brother Stanley, we have former City Councilperson Janie Blackwell, who we're going to hear from in just a few seconds. She's the founder and chairperson of the Mayor's Commission on African and Caribbean Immigrant Affairs. And my now new good friend, Brother Vofi Jabate, he's going to talk to us about Akana, what it is and what it does. But let me give it back to Councilperson Janie Blackwell. Let me ask you, what is your role in Africatown? I know we're having some technology problems, technical difficulties, so I'm not sure if we still have former Councilperson Janie Blackwell with us, and we don't. I see it spinning. So let me give it back to Stan. Stan, you talked about Africatown. What can you share with the audience about Akana? What is Akana? What does it do? What is it designed to do?
And hopefully Vofi will get back, but Akana African Cultural Alliance of North America is a major service provider in Southwest Philadelphia, 5530 Chester Avenue. And as service providers started off providing services to immigrants and their families. African Caribbean immigrants and their families have come to the United States. They need assistance with legal issues. You may remember, Michael, at a time when Black people, immigrants, were being picked up at 7-Eleven and deported immediately out of this country. But we fought, along with Mrs. Blackwell as one of the leaders, to make Philadelphia a sanctuary city. So that has been taken off the table, but these families still suffer as they come in. You may have just heard recently about the buses of immigrants, and many of them are Haitian immigrants that come from Texas. They're in Philadelphia, and Akana assists them with living, help them with food, as well as places to live, stay during their stay here, number one. Secondly,
in fact, hold that thought, because as you pointed out, Brother Bofi is going to talk more about that, but I'm glad you gave us the intro. But let me get back to you and your background. You're a bright man with so many titles. Tell folks why you have been involved in this kind of work from day one. I mean, where are you from? Are you born and raised in Philadelphia?
Yes, born and raised in Philadelphia, lived in Strawberry Ranch most of my time.
So my question is, why do you care about this international stuff so much?
Well, as I said before, I was blessed to have an opportunity in the early days to work with some great leaders, visionaries like Reverend Leon Sullivan. And you couldn't be around Rev for a couple of days without understanding that my responsibility in learning was to continue to perpetuate my learning, but to work, it was a global incident. He's one of the early people that taught me about globalization and our impact as people. And you may remember in his book in 1976, he was the first Black person on the board of General Motors in the United States of America. And he stood up in his first board meeting and said, "Free Nelson Mandela and down with apartheid." Can you imagine his courage? And it took to do that in 1976. I mean, I would be cringing there, but he taught us you always had to stand up for right. His struggle with, just in Philadelphia, with the boycott against the business community, his work, of course, Lucian Backwell, all these guys came out of an environment. Cecil B. Moore came out of an environment that we struggled. I know people may not remember the day where we had to fight to get into the Democratic Party.
I'm so glad you brought that up, and I hope we have time
to get into the Democratic. And I was around when the people started, John White Sr., Hardy Williams, Lucian Blackwell, William H. Grader created an independent Black organization to fight the institution. I know that Janie was there. She's a young girl then, but she was there and helping us do that. So it's out of that struggle.
We do finally have Janie Blackwell back. And let me say to Janie and Vafi, you all, I don't know what you pay Stan, but he deserves more. I mean, this guy knows everything. When we had the technical glitches, I had some questions for you two, and Stan had the answers. So he's doing a great job. And we want to jump right to you, Madam Councilperson Janie Blackwell. Then I want to get to Brother Jabate. But I want to ask you, Councilwoman, why are you so concerned about the plight of our African and Caribbean brothers and sisters? Why did you take this on as a project in your political and personal life?
Oh, listen, way back at the beginning of my career in city council, I had some Africans contact me and say they were vendors in Southwest Philadelphia and people were fighting them and calling L&I on them and not allowing them to fight for their living as vendors as other people. So I started coming out here with my area. I started coming out, meeting with these African vendors, talking with them, and we got involved in a discussion about how life could be made better, how city council could support them, and we kept it going. It has been a wonderful journey, and I got involved in it as I do with everything that I do. It's always about public service. It's always about us realizing that we are brothers and sisters keeper, that we have to support one another. We have to help one another. And Stan mentioned it is 36 countries out of the 55 in Africa that are part of our commission, even as we speak. And we are overjoyed because everybody there has various interests, various needs. Their country has special issues that we discuss. We try to raise money for them. We try to help their people, no matter what that country is and what's going on. We stay involved and we try to support and wherever we can. And it's been a life of joy. I'm so excited about Africatown that I can't contain it. And it's just been a wonderful journey to to accept the fact and to work with all of my brothers and sisters and to decide with this area is going to be one, as Volpe said, that doesn't exist anywhere. So, stay attached, included. Everybody stay involved in this because you will be very, very pleased to see what happens.
Very well said. And both you and Stan mentioned Brother Vofi Jabate a couple times. I want to ask you,
Okay.
Brother
Right.
Vofi.
Volpe's right.
Yeah, and I want to come right to him. I was so impressed with his scholarship and his passion in our discussion yesterday. I just want to ask him, tell folks about your background and why is it that when you came here to America and you succeeded, you could have just done what you did and take it in personally and benefit yourself? Why do you feel so committed to help your Black brothers and sisters from the diaspora when you could have basically taken the money and run based on how personally bright you are? So tell folks about your background and why you're so committed to all Black people.
Well, first of all, we both talked yesterday, and obviously, I'm a Bob Marley fan. In my early life, I realized that the unity of the Black race was very important, and that if we did not work to unify Black folks, we will remain splintered. And the more splintered you are, the more conquerable you are. And with all of what happened, most confusion is that most people don't understand what happened. We talk about slavery, about 400 years of Black degradation in America. But what we forget also is that with the vast resources of Africa, we also have colonialism that went there, took it over, and they never turned back. Today, we have more African countries that are poor than that can be compared to European or Eastern European countries. So that being said, if you are a man of good character, if you are a person of good character, that is like Ginny Blackwell, or once you come in touch with this reality, you want to find a solution. And that's what we did. We found a means by which we can now tell people that whatever happened to Ginny, myself, Stan, and the rest of us, we will leave a legacy of trying to solve the problem of Black people and bringing people together. I do not consider Jenny Black. I always call her, she's my sister. And in fact, that's how we look at each other. We care for each other and we are the same people. The reason why we are being conquered is because we allow other folks to define our character. Jenny Blackwell is an African woman. She realized that. And an African man, I realized that. Stan is an African man. He realized that. And all of the folks that we're trying to bring together, as long as you have a Black blood in you, you are not white. And
Yes.
you are an African. Once you have 1% of Black blood in you, you are an African. So that being said, we realized this, and we realized that there was a lot of need within the African community over the years. Like you and I talked yesterday, when America said we are about 3.7% unemployment. But then when you come into our neighborhood, unemployment is like about 60 or 70%, almost like in any poor African country in the world, or in a country in the world. So if we have gone to school and learn and have access, that Jenny Blackwell have access to city resources, serving as a city council person, and she has a lot of respect across the city and the state. She using that opportunity to leave or to help other Black folks. Who else would do it for us? Nobody would do it for us. Stan is 80 years old, but the reality is he has learned both culture, both African, Caribbean, and African American culture. And he knows that we are the same people. He knows that we are the same people. So that being said, what by one, by all of us. If we don't tie our clothes to the hem and tie ourselves together, we will easily be defeated. So that is what drives me to work to create the community that we are talking about, that is going to be referred to, or that is currently in town.
Very well said. Folks, you're listening to the voices of the voice you just heard, for example, Brother Vofi Jabate, the CEO of ACANA. That's the African Cultural Alliance of North America. You're going to hear again from all three of them because we have about 6 minutes left. So I'm going to give each of them 2 minutes for a closing statement. And in that closing statement, I'd like each of you to include some contact information. If there's a website, if there's an email address, if there's a phone number, if there's social media, tell folks how they can get in touch with you. So what we're going to do is this. We're going to start with 2 minutes for Stanley. Whatever you want to say for the next 2 minutes, you want to repeat, highlight, whatever you want to share with the audience, we'll give you 2 minutes. Then we'll hear again from Brother Vofi Jabate, who's going to have his 2 minutes talking about whatever he prefers to, and then we'll wrap things up with former City Council person, the Honorable Janie from Cheney Blackwell. So let's go to Brother Stanley, your 2 minutes, including your contact information.
Let me thank you, Michael, again, and your radio show and the Tribune for working with us and getting the word out. That's very appreciated. Number one. Number two, my personal contact is my cell, which is 215 area code 817-9887. 215-817-9887. Let me thank all of the people I mentioned who I stand on the shoulders of Reverend Sullivan, Bill Gray, Hardy Williams, Lucian Blackwell, David P. Richardson Jr., many, many people I had the benefit of to work closely with and to learn many of the things that I've done and worked with around the world, number one. Secondly, my second team here in my old age, as Vofi said, I'm 80 years old, and my retiring is a Seattle.
I think Vofi misspoke. He meant to say 52 years old, but go ahead.
In my old age, we are working to share that experience and learn and continue to learn. We expect Africatown to be an economic driver, an economic engine in Southwest Philadelphia that will impact the entire city of Philadelphia, number one. And number two, Vofi did not mention that he and Mrs. Blackwell have worked together to make this come together. And when Mrs. Blackwell was in city council, she helped put up the money to help us do the study to help us move along where we are now. So, you know, it's very difficult to have a vision without any resources to implement that vision. And we want to thank her for that. People look at the newspaper, read about 9 million, but if we needed $2.95 to get it over, maybe $500,000, she was able to help get that $500,000 on the table in the budget for us to do the thing. So God bless you, Janie and Vofi. The other thing I need to say about Vofi is,
you got about 30 seconds, Stan, about 30 seconds.
Okay. ACANA is a dynamic organization. In the 25 years, he, along with his beautiful staff, have created the credibility and work that is make everybody need to love them. And so I appreciate him and love him too for his work. So thank you.
Stan, thank you very much for all the great work you do and for getting us through today's show with the technological problems. You just went right through it, provide the information. We're now going to hear from my good friend, Brother Vofi Jabate, the CEO of ACANA. In your 2 minutes, sir, if anything you want to highlight, repeat, add, along with your contact information, please do so, sir.
First of all, I want to give you my appreciation and thank you. I also want to acknowledge the work of the Councilwoman Jenny Blackwell over the years. I would not have for any trusting any partner more than Jeannie over the years. Never disengage. Akana, my number, I am the chief executive officer. Akana is 23. It is located at 530 Chester Avenue. And the main line there is 215-729-8225. My cell phone is 484-43209. In the work that we've done, we do it to glorify God. And we are there, and God has blessed us through the work that He has done to bring us alive. Thank all of you for listening to us today. And I hope that this is not the last time that you contact us. And we are honored to have been part of this dialogue or discussion today.
Thank you very much. And we'll wrap things up with the Honorable City Councilperson Janie Blackwell, the founder and chairperson of the Mayor's Commission on African and Caribbean Immigrant Affairs. Madam Chairperson, final 2 minutes are yours.
Thank you very much. Let me thank you, Michael Cord, this angry Black man.
And did we lose Madam Councilperson? We might have. I believe we have. We lost you, but we got you back. Go ahead.
All right. Let me also thank Stan. You know, Stan's lived in Africa for years. He's been there some 29 times. So he's definitely a part of the continent. And Volfi Jabate is, these are my brothers. We move forward together, you know, for what I do and why. The scripture tells us in season and out of season. I always fight for people in need. I always fight for those things I believe in. I always will, as long as God allows me, gives me the privilege to do so. So I thank them for all that they do. I thank you for your commitment and all of those who tuned in to realize that this is what it's about. This is an important struggle. We're all together, and we're looking forward to everybody staying involved so that we may all move forward together. God bless you.
Very well said on behalf of all three of you, but more important, very well done. I'm talking about Brother Vofi Jabate, the CEO of ACANA, that's the African Cultural Alliance of North America. You just heard from Madam Chairperson of the Mayor's Commission of African and Caribbean Immigrant Affairs, and Brother Stanley Straw, the Chairman Emeritus of that same commission. If you want to reach them, the numbers are 215-817-9887. That's 215-817-9887. That's Brother Stan's cell phone number. And ACANA, 215-729-8225. 215-729-8225. Tune in to Radio Courtroom on WURD 96.1 FM tomorrow to hear each of them. Tune in to next Sunday's Philadelphia Tribune. There'll be more. I got to tell you, there has been nothing in my adult life that has been more important to me than Africatown. This brings us together not only economically and politically, but most important, spiritually and culturally. This is the answer to what ails Black folks in America. The reason why Black folks tend to be where they are is because we don't know who we are. We can know who we are by knowing more about Africatown. So I'm going to be an official ambassador to Africatown, recruiting everybody to join in. Folks, we got to run. I'm going to end this show like end every show. It goes like this. Think Black, I'm out.